Luke 22, verses 7 to 15. Then came the day of unleavened bread, on which the Passover lamb had to be sacrificed. Jesus sent Peter and John, saying, "Go and make preparations for us to eat the Passover." "Where do you want us to prepare for it?" they asked. He replied, "As you enter the city, a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him to the house that he enters, and say to the owner of the house, 'The teacher asked, where is the guest room where I may eat the Passover with my disciples?' He will show you a large upper room, all furnished. Make preparations there." They left and found things just as Jesus had told them. So they prepared the Passover. When the hour came, Jesus and his apostles reclined at the table. And he said to them, "I have eagerly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer." Some stories are worth telling over and over. Some things are worth celebrating again and again. Some rituals and traditions, however old, can still teach us and mold us and make us think. Some symbols are worth cherishing. In Luke 22, Jesus sends two of his disciples, Peter and John, ahead of him to prepare the Passover 2 days in advance, to make preparations. And so we get this sense of anticipation. There is intention here. There is forethought. This is not a spur of the moment dinner party or a fun night out with the boys. This was really a big deal. He sends two of his closest disciples ahead of him to get it ready. And when Jesus arrives, he says this, "I have eagerly desired to eat this Passover with you." In other words, I long for it. And he says, this Passover. Not just the Passover, because they have never done that before. No, they have. They have done it before. They have done the Passover before, but this Passover, this particular Passover. And the table was prepared. Passover, an annual celebration that God's people had been commemorating since the Exodus, the biggest event on the Jewish calendar. The Passover, where people travel from far and wide to come to Jerusalem to celebrate, to remember, to tell the stories, to make their sacrifices. It has been going on for about 1400 years. It was a big deal. It has always been a big deal. And why wouldn't it be? Because Passover commemorates the most incredible event in God's people's history. This is where their identity came from as a holy nation. And this is where the Israelites got their understanding of oppression and justice, affliction and freedom. This is where the Israelites learned who God was, the God whom they have come to know as the great I Am. A people who had been so downtrodden for so long that they had no sense of purpose, no dignity, no worth. But through this one event were elevated as a holy nation. Slaves who were set free. A whole nation that didn't fight back, that didn't rise up in revolution and overthrow their oppressors. But in just one night, when their door frames were covered with the blood of the Lamb, death passed over them and they walked out in freedom. And so in all the toing and froing that we follow through the rest of the Old Testament, the chronicles of God's people, we see them in relationship with God and out of relationship with God. In relationship with God, out of relationship with God. And again, we see this phrase repeated, where God says to them, "Remember, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt." At the very first Passover in Exodus 12, at the end of some detailed description about how to prepare the meal, spotless lamb, unleavened bread, bitter herbs. In verse 14, the Lord instructed them and said this: "This is a day you are to commemorate. For the generations to come, you shall celebrate it as a festival to the Lord, a lasting ordinance." Keep doing it again and again. And so they did. And this is how stories were told. This is how faith was passed on. This is how children learn. This is how cultures were created through feasts and festivals, coming together in community, sharing a meal. Passover was not just for the priests. It wasn't a practice just for the adults. The kids were part of it too. It was for all of God's people. And it was highly anticipated, the biggest event of the year, because some stories are worth telling over and over. Some things are worth celebrating again and again. Some rituals and traditions, however old, make us think and teach us and mold us. Some symbols are worth cherishing. So Passover continues to be a reference point for the Israelites. It's kind of an indication of where they are at with their relationship with God. Were they remembering? Were they telling the stories? Were they passing on the faith? Hezekiah becomes king. And after years of chasing foreign gods, he calls the people back into covenant. And he says, we need to celebrate the Passover. And so the table is prepared. His great-grandson Josiah becomes king. And he recognizes this gaping hole in the spiritual lives of the Israelites. He says, we have been missing the Passover. We have not been telling the stories. And the table is prepared. In the book of Ezra, when the temple is rebuilt, they celebrated the Passover together. And the table is prepared. And so here in the first century, Jesus reclines with his disciples. And a table is prepared. The table has always been prepared. In fact, Jesus had sat down in the same meal many times before. The disciples had shared this meal many times before. It was familiar. It was tradition. It wasn't new. It was special. But Jesus was about to make it spectacular. It was one of those Jesus moments where Jesus goes, you have heard this, but I'm going to tell you this. You have seen this before, but I'm going to show you this. So they are to eat and prepare the lamb. In Exodus 12, verse 3, it tells us that on the 10th day of the month, they are to take a lamb without defects, a perfect, spotless lamb. And he says, this is the instruction God gave the Israelites who were living in Egypt. Take care of the lamb until the 14th day. Set it apart. Don't just identify which one in the flock. Don't just leave it in the pen with the others. Keep it. Kind of like a pet. Maybe some of them even brought it into their homes, where it was tended and fed, sheltered and protected. How many of you have pets? First time ever, what pet did you get? Perhaps it was a hamster or a lovebird, a puppy dog. It doesn't take long to get attached to a pet, does it? Mine was a little palm-sized chick. 4 actually. Why grandma thought it was a good idea for her HDB flat-dwelling grandson to have 4 little chicks, I do not know. But as it turns out, it became my favorite animal. I love chickens. Barbecued, roasted, fried. I love them all. Doesn't take long to get attached to a pet. God says to them, keep that lamb with you for 4 days and then sacrifice it. Now watch this. Jesus comes into the home of the Jews, into Jerusalem, 4 days before Passover, the triumphant entry, Palm Sunday. He comes in, he becomes part of the people, into the hearts of the people. One of them set apart as a spotless lamb. Celebrated Palm Sunday. 4 days later, he was sacrificed at Passover. The Passover wasn't just about looking backwards. It has always been pointing forward to him. Written on every page, the desire of all ages. Throughout the generations, roughly 1400 years, between the Exodus, the first Passover, and here where Jesus sits with his disciples at this Passover, this Last Supper. Over time, there have been various rituals, traditions that have been added into that simple prescription God had given. They have become rabbinic requirements, things that were added to the practice to help tell the story. So the Jews every year, when they would sit down for the Passover, they would follow the Seder. The Seder is like an order, a program of events that would say, this is how the host will tell the story and lead the people through. We will take the bread here, we will recite the psalm here, we will ask these questions here. The Seder included the children. The children would speak up at certain points. They would say, why is this more important than any other night? And the host would then tell the story. So there's this detailed plan for the telling of the story, which is called the Haggadah. Now, when it comes to the breaking of the bread, the unleavened bread that God had prescribed at the first Passover, over time, traditions came to be added to this, and the host was to take the unleavened bread, the matzah, break it into three. One that was three. He would take the middle one out and cover it in cloth. It's called the afikomen. If there were children in the home, it would be hidden somewhere in the house, and they would make a game out of it. The children would have to go and find the afikomen and bring it back, and with a small prize given to the finder. The practice of covering up the afikomen seems a way of remembering how the Jews left Egypt in a hurry with the matzah, the unleavened bread, wrapped in clothes and carried on their shoulders, as depicted in Exodus 12:34. So the people took their dough before the yeast was added and carried it on their shoulders in the kneading troughs, wrapped in clothing. At a certain point during the Seder, right after the actual meal, the host would take that afikomen, that middle piece from the three that had been hidden and covered in cloth. He would bring it out. He would bring it out and then break it into small pieces and share it around the table. One taken from three, wrapped in linen, buried, and brought back. One broken and shared. So when Jesus takes that piece of bread and shares it, it wasn't a new idea where he goes, I know, this is how I would explain it to the disciples. I would take some bread and I'll break it. No, they have done this before. It was not new. It was familiar. It was tradition. It was special. But then, Jesus does this spectacular thing where he takes that bread and he says, this is my body broken for you. Do you get it, guys? All these years, But let me tell you now, this is my body. Now, the wine is not prescribed in that first Passover, but again, over time, it became a rabbinic requirement to share wine at the feast. At the Passover, they would set aside 4 cups, and at a certain point throughout the Seder, the host would lift up the cup and say a blessing over it, a kind of like a toast, a celebration of a promise. It was a celebration of 4 promises actually that were given to Moses before he even came to Egypt, when God was telling him what he was going to do. Exodus 6 verses 6 to 7, this is what God says to Moses. I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will deliver you from slavery to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm. And with great acts of judgment, I will take you to be my people, and I will be your God. So now in the first century, at 4 points throughout the Seder, the cup is filled and raised. And that's essentially a toast to these fulfilled promises, to the faithfulness of God. I will bring you out. I will deliver you from. I will redeem you. I will take you. It's almost certain that Jesus and his disciples followed the traditions of the Seder. The gospel writers did not have to say they followed the Seder. They just have to say they did the Passover. They all knew. That's what everybody did. In the gospel accounts, it says that Jesus took the cup after they had eaten and given thanks. Now, according to the Seder, we know that after the meal and after giving thanks was the 3rd cup. They give thanks after the meal, not before. So they say it at the end. So we know it's at the end of the meal. In fact, Luke's gospel added this detail. He says, after the supper, after they had eaten, Jesus took the cup. So according to the Seder, that would be the 3rd cup. The first cup would be right at the beginning of the Passover. The second cup at the beginning of the meal. After the meal, they would have the afikomen. This is where Jesus took the bread, broke it, gave it to his disciples. Following which, Jesus took the cup. That would be the 3rd cup. Do you know what the 3rd cup is? I will redeem you with an outstretched arm. This is the cup where Jesus says, this cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you, the cup of redemption. Passover had not only pointed back, it was pointing to this. Just as Israel has been brought out from under the burden of the Egyptians, now Jesus brings us out from the burdens of sin. Just as Israel was delivered from slavery to them, Jesus now delivers us from slavery to fear, to guilt, shame, anything that enslaves us, anything that binds us. Just as Israel was redeemed with an outstretched arm, Jesus redeems us with an outstretched arms on the cross. Just as Israel was taken to be his people, Jesus takes us to be his people and will take us home one day. The promises translated, made present and fulfilled in Jesus Christ, a new Exodus. For 1400 years, God's people had been celebrating and remembering an event that changed the world of the Israelites. But here at this Passover, this Last Supper, Jesus changes it again. And now we celebrate and remember an event that changed the entire world. So now Jesus says, do this in remembrance of me. Because some stories are worth telling over and over. Some things are worth celebrating again and again. Some rituals and traditions teach us, mold us, and make us think. And some symbols are worth cherishing. Right now, at your table, a table is prepared. If you are gathered around your family, now would be a good time to pass the bread and the cup around. I'd like you to take that bread in your hand and let's listen to the words of Jesus again, as recorded for us in Luke's Gospel. Jesus took the bread, he gave thanks, and he broke it. He gave it to his disciples, saying, "This is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." Let us pray together. Jesus, we remember your sacrifice, and we thank you for your broken body. With this bread that reminds us, and as we eat it, bless us. As we feed, nourish us, because it is your bread alone that gives us life. Thank you. Let's take the bread together. Now take the cup. And let's claim those promises that Jesus has fulfilled. Promise to bring you out, to deliver you from whatever enslaves you, to redeem you, and to take you as his people, and to take you home. In the same way, after the supper, Jesus took the cup, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you." Jesus, we are grateful for your blood that was spilled. You said, "Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the new covenant, which is poured out for the forgiveness of sins." We want to say thank you for what you have done for us, for freeing us, delivering us, redeeming us, and calling us your own, and for coming back to get us home. We look forward to that day when we could drink it anew with you in your Father's kingdom. Let's drink the cup together. Now, at the very end of the Passover, it says that after Jesus and his disciples had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives and to Gethsemane. Now, we don't really know which hymn they sang. So what I want to do right now is to lead us through a hymn, Psalm 136. Well, a portion of it, because it's quite a long psalm. Now, if I were Derek, I would sing it. But since I'm not, we are going to say it. And this is sort of like a repetitive psalm. It's like a call and response. And the beautiful thing about a call and a response like this is it allows us to say enough till we believe it. To say enough to let it soak in. And to allow ourselves to become completely convinced of it until we can say it with conviction. So, I'm going to read the lines in bold, and I'd like you to respond with, "His steadfast love endures forever." All right? So wherever you are, let's say it as a grateful response to what the Lord has done. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His steadfast love endures forever. Give thanks to the God of gods. His steadfast love endures forever. Give thanks to the Lord of lords. His steadfast love endures forever. To him who alone does great wonders, his steadfast love endures forever. To him who by his understanding made the heavens, his steadfast love endures forever. To him who spread out the earth upon the waters, his steadfast love endures forever. To him who made the great lights, his steadfast love endures forever. The sun to govern the day, his steadfast love endures forever. The moon and stars to govern the night, his steadfast love endures forever. To him who struck down the firstborn of Egypt, his steadfast love endures forever, and brought Israel out from among them, his steadfast love endures forever. With a mighty hand and outstretched arm, his steadfast love endures forever. It is he who remembered us in our low estate. His steadfast love endures forever, and freed us from our enemies. His steadfast love endures forever. Give thanks to the God of heaven. His steadfast love endures forever. Amen.